I knew the day was going to be a grind before the sun even made up its mind. The kind of travel day where your shoulders feel like they're holding up the terminal roof, where coffee is a survival tool, not a beverage, where the promise you make to yourself, pay the upgrade, buy a sliver of quiet, arrive with something left in the tank, feels like the only smart decision you've made all week. So I boarded that long haul with a simple plan: sit down, plug in, finish slides, close my eyes for a few hours, land looking like a human being instead of a laundry bag that lost a fight with the spin cycle. That was the dream. That was the contract I made with myself and my credit card. And then I got to my row, and my seat was taken, not by a person, not by some boarding pass mix-up with an apologetic smile and a "can I swap with you," but by a handbag, a beige, performatively understated, look at me without looking at me designer handbag, perched upright and buckled in like it had frequent flyer status and a favorite meal, the leather catching the cabin lights, the metal hardware winking like it knew things about me I didn't, and beside it, at the window, a woman guarding that bag with the kind of protective posture you reserve for toddlers and secrets, one arm draped over the seat back, phone pressed to her ear, sunglasses still on, inside the plane, at night, like the cabin lights worked for her. I took a breath, a good one. The kind you teach yourself after too many airport counters and not enough sleep, and I said, gentle, because I was born hopeful, "Excuse me, this is my seat." And I lifted the boarding pass in a way that said, "I'm not here for a fight. Just the obvious, just the number printed in black and white." Her hand came up without her eyes ever leaving her call. Palm out, the international sign for "you can wait. I'm busy being important." And into the phone she said, "No, no." I told them to handle it. "The bag stays with me." The bag. With me. Like we were all extras in a rom-com where the true love interest was a purse. When she finally ended the call, she slid the sunglasses down to the tip of her nose, and I saw blue eyes sharp enough to slice cardboard. The kind of gaze that scans you top to bottom and decides you are not on the guest list. "You're in my seat." I tried again, calm but with steel under it, because I'd paid for that steel, and she smiled a very small, very polished smile and tapped the bag like it might purr. "No," she said. "This one is for my Birkin." My brain filed that sentence under phrases you don't expect to hear at 30,000 feet, right next to "I brought my own oxygen," but I kept my voice level. "Your bag is in a seat assigned to a person, specifically me." "It needs space," she said, already tired of explaining to the peasants. "The overheads are filthy. The underseat is a scuffing hazard. You can take one of those back there." And she pointed, not to another business seat, not to some miraculous open pod I'd missed, but vaguely, dismissively, toward economy, the land of knees and elbows and the human condition, as if tickets were suggestions and class of service flowed downhill. Around us I could feel that soft ripple of attention that happens in shared spaces where a story might be about to break. Heads tilting without moving, side glances hiding behind in-flight magazines. Everyone pretending to mind their business, while very much not. And I did the mental math that every traveler learns to do. Time to push back, risk of escalation, the cost of being right versus the cost of being late. And before I chose a lane, a flight attendant appeared like the universe sent a referee, early career, crisp uniform, soft smile. "Is everything all right here?" "She's fine," the woman said immediately, and yes, she used my pronouns like she was assigning me a seat and a category at the same time. "There's a little mix-up, but I checked in early, and I'm keeping this seat. He can take one in coach. He's being very understanding." And the way she said understanding made it sound like I'd just been given a gold star for cooperating with my own demotion. I handed over my boarding pass like a lifeline, and the attendant checked the number, checked the seat, checked the bag, and said in that careful tone people use with explosive devices and expensive customers, "Ma'am, this seat does belong to him, and all carry-on items need to be stowed overhead or under the seat in front for taxi, takeoff, and landing." And the woman, later I would learn her name was Sloan, for now she was red blouse and rules don't apply, smiled in a way that flashed teeth not. "Kindness. This is a limited edition Birkin. It's worth more than the seat. I won't compress it." Here's the part where a younger version of me might have squared my shoulders, declared chapter and verse of airline policy, invited a round of applause from the peanut gallery and a guaranteed headache. But the older, more traveled version has a different toolkit. When someone has already decided they live above consequences, arguing is just entertainment for them. What works is documentation and patience. So when the attendant, clearly doing the math of on-time departure versus a standoff in row 3, asked if I would mind sitting in an empty seat one row back while they sorted it out, I nodded, not because she was right, but because I knew I would be. From that temporary seat, I could still see Sloane reclined like a commercial for success, one arm draped possessively around the bag, telling the man across the aisle in a stage whisper that she'd be keeping things civilized up here because some people aren't used to business, which is a sentence you can only say out loud if you have confused price with character. And as the cabin filled with the soft rhythm of boarding, bins sliding closed, buckles clicking, wheels thumping up the jetway, I took out my phone, not to film, not for spectacle, just a clean audio memo, thumbed to record, placed flat on my thigh, microphone open, because facts are cold and calm and very hard to argue with when the time comes. Sloane kept talking, because of course she did, about exclusivity and scarcity and connections, how some things aren't for everyone, how dust in the overhead bins is basically invisible mold, and underseat storage is for people who don't care about what they own. And the man nodded because what else do you do when someone is auditioning for a part only they can see? And the woman behind her muttered something under her breath that sounded a lot like "bless her heart" translated from Southern to Universal. And on cue another flight attendant arrived, older, anchored, the kind of presence that has seen every possible crisis played out between gate and galley and understands that authority can be soft without being weak. "Ma'am," she said, and there was nothing soft about the subtext. "We need to resolve the seating before we can close the door. Please place your bag in the overhead bin or under the seat in front of you. Those are federal safety regulations." I said no, Sloane replied, not yelling but raising her voice enough to recruit an audience. "I checked in early. This seat is staying as is. If he's upset, he can file a complaint when we land. Your check-in time does not override assigned seating," the attendant said, steady as a metronome, "and the value of your belongings does not override safety rules." And then we reached the line, the one that tells you exactly what story you're in, because Sloane leaned forward, chin up, and delivered it like a spell. "Do you know who I am?" The air changed. You could feel it, that collective exhale people do when a script becomes predictable and bad. Some groans, some smiles that weren't kind, and the attendant didn't blink. "I'm concerned with safety and compliance, not personal status," she said. "Last time. Please stow the bag." "Absolutely not," Sloane said. "I am not risking $35,000 for dust and knees." And yes, she named the price, because what's the point of value if you can't hear it out loud? "Very well," the attendant said. "I'll speak to the captain about a non-compliant passenger." That was my cue for Act 2. I stood, not dramatic, just deliberate, the way you get up to use the restroom, and I met the attendant near the galley, kept my voice low. "If it helps, I have clean audio of her refusing and insulting passengers and crew." I showed the waveform, pressed play, let 30 seconds roll, her insistence, the price, the refusal, the line. "Do you know who I am?" Clear as the chime before takeoff. And the attendant nodded once like a chess player who finally sees the board. When I sat back down, the cabin had taken on that waiting room silence, the kind that says we are all witnesses now. And in a minute the attendant returned with a second crew member, both of them carrying the weight of the captain behind their name tags. "Ma'am, he said, "you've been given multiple instructions and refused to comply. Due to safety and seating regulations, you must stow your bag or you will be relocated to a different seat." "Relocated where?" Sloane asked, and the veneer finally cracked, because power doesn't like ambiguity. "To economy," the attendant said, simple as weather. You could hear the tension snap, not as laughter, not as applause, just that quiet movement in shoulders and throats when justice walks into a room wearing a lanyard. And for the first time I saw fear in Sloane's eyes. Not terror, not danger, just the specific panic of losing the performance. "You can't do that," I paid. "For one seat," the attendant said, "not two." And there it was, the line that will be quoted in other people's stories. Sloane didn't speak. She picked up the bag like it was a small animal and not a problem, hugged it too close to her chest, stood shakily, the sunglasses back up like armor, and began the longest short walk in commercial aviation, from business to economy. Past faces that were not cruel, but not kind either. Past people who will never admit they watched, but will absolutely tell their partners about it later. Past the divider that says out loud what money can buy and what manners can't, to a middle seat near the back. Between a stranger in a hoodie and a woman knitting quietly, where the bag filled her lap and the armrests pressed like opinions. I slid into my rightful seat and the man across the aisle leaned just enough to whisper, "Good for you." Not like I'd won something. More like we'd averted something, and I smiled without teeth and said nothing. Because the victory wasn't loud. It was the door closing, the taxi beginning, the captain telling us about flight time and headwinds while the cabin lights softened, and my shoulders finally dropped the half-inch they'd been holding. Time became airplane time. Elastic, unimportant, measured in water refills and the slow creep of a map across the seatback screen. Until turbulence rolled in like a reminder that the sky has the last word. A small bump, a tray at a tilt, a glass tipping, a splash. Not a disaster, not a deluge. Just enough liquid to arc from a passing tray and find its way onto Sloane's lap 2 cabins back, where a very expensive bag was occupying very limited real estate. A sharp gasp, not a scream, the sound of a life plan brushing up against physics, and the attendant apologized before the napkins landed. Because that's what service looks like even when the universe is doing its own comedy. And I didn't feel triumphant, just finished, like a circle had finally found its end. After that, the flight found its rhythm. Seatbelt sign off, shades down. People settling into the rituals we all know too well. And as the hours unfolded, the lead attendant returned, leaned in with that conspiratorial kindness frontline workers reserve for the people who made their job easier, not harder. "Thank you for your patience and how calm you were," she said, and I shrugged a little laugh. I figured some bags fly better than their owners, and she had to cover her smile with her hand. Because professionalism doesn't forbid joy, it just asks you to muffle it sometimes. I slept a little, not long. The good kind of sleep that takes the edge off and gives your spine back. I finished my deck. I wrote a gentle email that read like confidence and not panic. And when the wheels found the runway, and the cabin broke into that small chorus of zippers and chirps, Sloane stayed down, waiting, hoping the aisle would clear so she could dissolve into a space where this didn't happen. And I didn't meet her eyes because there was nothing in them I needed. I had my seat and my breath and the simple fact that respect had been restored by rules and people willing to enforce them. If this were the whole story, it would be enough. The cool patience, the documentation, the crew with backbone, the bag demoted from protagonist to prop. But on long flights, your mind has room to wander, and mine drifted to questions I didn't expect to ask. Like, where does that kind of entitlement come from? What story do you have to tell yourself to believe a possession outranks a person? To be so fluent in a currency that you forget there are other ones? Decency, patience, the humility of sharing space with strangers. And I thought about times I'd been tired and sharp and not my best self, and how thin the line can be between asserting and trampling. How easy it is to forget that other people's days are as heavy as yours. I also thought about the small, quiet heroism of documentation. How in a world where the loudest voice often wins the moment, a clean record wins the day. How the phone on my thigh wasn't a weapon but a mirror, and mirrors make everyone behave either better or more honestly, which in the end is almost the same thing. Still, the part of me raised by teachers and bus drivers, and a mother who didn't let me cut lines, kept looping back to the simplest point. Airplanes work because the rules are even, because we agree that safety lies above status, that your connections don't get to override my seatbelt, that the privilege you buy ends where the collective good begins. And if that sounds preachy, it's only because 40,000 feet has a way of clarifying what matters and what doesn't. We shuffled off the plane, row by row, impatience disguised as stretching, and the terminal swallowed us, that bright, unkind light that turns everyone into a version of themselves they don't love. And I walked straight into the day I'd hoped to have, not rested exactly, but not wrecked. The meeting went fine, better than fine, and the only trace of the flight that followed me into the room was a steadiness in my voice that wasn't there the night before. The sort of steadiness you earn when you pick timing over volume. Later, alone with a sandwich that tasted like victory because it was the first thing I'd eaten sitting still, I replayed the story the way you do when the adrenaline leaves, looking for the moment it could have gone another way, and I kept landing on the same beat. when the first attendant asked me to move for now, and how the younger version of me would have said absolutely not and turned a solvable problem into a lit match. How there's more than one way to hold your ground, and sometimes the most strategic thing you can do is step back 6 feet and gather proof. Give the system a chance to be what it promises to be. I thought too about the theater of it all, how every plane is a little democracy where we vote with our eyes, where silence is offense and defense, and sometimes mercy, how no one applauded because that would have been cruel, but the way backs straightened, the way shoulders untensed, the way the cabin's temperature dropped 2 degrees when the bag left the seat, that was applause in lowercase, that was relief. People have asked me since, friends, a stranger in a lounge who recognized me by my voice before he placed me in the story he'd heard from a guy 2 rows back. If I would have felt the same if she'd apologized quickly, if she'd said, "You know what? You're right. I'm sorry. I'm nervous about damage. Could you help me find a clean spot for this? Could we put a blanket down?" And the answer is yes, of course yes. Because this was never about the bag. It was about the hierarchy she tried to build. With it, and apologies are wrecking balls for bad hierarchies. They make room for grace. They reopen doors that entitlement slams. But that didn't happen. What happened is what you already know. A wealth signal tried to swallow a rule, and the rule had teeth, and for once those teeth bit down where they should. So I'll leave you with this, not as a moral, not as a sermon, just as a traveler talking to fellow travelers the way we do on long drives and longer flights. In a voice that understands sometimes your best self gets stuck behind your worst day. If you ever find yourself at the intersection of someone's status and your dignity, and the temptation is to go loud because they're already loud, try going still instead. Try being the person who trusts a process enough to feed it evidence and time. Because while volume is good at winning rooms, patience is very, very good at winning outcomes. And if you've made it this far with me, I'm curious about your take, your lines, your stories. Have you ever had to choose between making a scene and making a case? Did you document or debate? Where would you draw the boundary between keeping your cool and letting yourself be walked on? And be honest, even if it stings a little. Was there a day you were the one clutching a symbol and forgetting the human? What should the crew have done differently, if anything? Should passengers record in these moments, or does that cross a line? Do you think downgrading her was fair, too harsh, not enough? Hit the comments and tell me where you land. Argue with me. Argue with each OT. Her respectfully, because the only thing better than a flight that lands on time is a community that knows how to disagree without making the cabin colder. And if you've ever had a bag, a policy, a person try to take your seat, literal or otherwise, share the story. The rest of us might need your playbook the next time arrogance tries to board early.